Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee. I'll start with just the introduction, and then we'll go from there. So currently, we have regrets from the chair, Manuela Rodriguez-Bowen, as well as the vice chair, River Hill. So once I've done the introduction, we'll need to find a volunteer to chair today's meeting. Councillor Holland has also sent her regrets, and Vanessa Gerasimo and Zerman Khan are not here yet, but will be on their way. From staff in attendance, we have Kevin Gibbs, the manager of Heritage Programming, Jennifer Campbell, the director of Heritage Services, and Mohammed Hassan, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office Manager. I'm Derek O'Shea, the committee clerk, and our meeting host today is Elizabeth Fawcett. And we do not have any members of public in attendance. So now we come to the question of if anybody would like to volunteer to chair the meeting today. I'm here to assist you, so don't let that be a barrier, but I'll see if anybody is interested for today. Not seeing any hands, I'm going to ask Councillor Neal. You are the first person on my screen. Would you be interested in stepping forward today and chairing just for today's meeting?
I'm happy to. My only challenge will be that I won't have the agenda in front of me. So occasionally I may ask you to post the agenda, or if you can give me a nudge and a hint with the agenda. Since I'm on Zoom, I don't have the agenda.
No worries, Councillor Neal. I can walk you through it. So thank you for volunteering. I assume there's no objections to Councillor Neal's temporary chairpersoning today. All right, seeing none. Thank you, Councillor Neal. So I guess the first thing you can do as chair is call the meeting to order.
I will call the meeting to order, and I will ask for a mover and a seconder for the agenda before us. Thank you, also, Sharon and Elsa. Sorry if I mispronounce your name, but thank you. And hello, Zerman.
Alsaby.
Thank you.
All right. In that case, Mr. Chair, we'll just call for the vote on that.
Okay. All those in favor? Carried. And I believe we have some minutes to confirm and pass. So is there a mover and a shaker for the minutes? Thank you, Zarman and Danita.
And just to confirm, Mr. Chair, there are two sets of minutes from the February and March meeting, but that can be done as one vote. So
thank you very much. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And I believe that's followed by, does anybody have a pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I believe we have an information report before us.
We do. There's actually a briefing that ties in with it, so we can consider those simultaneously. So the briefing is from Kevin Gibbs, the manager of Heritage Programming, and it's with respect to the report Heritage Services Programming with EDI Alignment 2022. And I believe Kevin has a PowerPoint that the meeting host will get on the screen. So Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much. So the intention of this briefing and the report is really twofold. First, to report on Heritage Services programs for 2022, but second, to look for input on what we can do better in 2022 and beyond. And the subject of a report, as was just mentioned, is Heritage Services Programming with EDI Alignment 2022. But our hope is really to have EDI alignment in all of our programs now and in the future as well. So we're looking for any input on how we can achieve this better. So next slide, please. So as a brief overview, I'll talk about the three sites through which we provide, Heritage Services provides programming. So the Pump House Museum, the McLaughlin Woodworking Museum, and City Hall. I'll also briefly mention the Indigenous community support that Heritage Services provides, as well as some future planning ideas that we have. In some ways, the museum sector is kind of cyclical. So we're always thinking about the next cycle. So thinking ahead to the next museum exhibit, the next schedule of programs. So next slide, please. So the report mentions some of the specific programs that we are running for 2022, but it also mentions some of the guiding considerations that are common to all of our programs and common to all of our museum exhibits. And these include the importance of community consultation. For example, the Your Stories, Our Histories consultation of a couple of years ago indicated some gaps in community history and storytelling, and these are now a priority for us. And we also think it's important to consider EDI considerations throughout the entire program design process, rather than EDI being tacked on as an afterthought to already existing programs. And it's also important to think holistically about EDI considerations in our programs to ensure that there's something for everyone, but also to see how ideas extending from one program can potentially benefit others. And it's important to be flexible as well. A lot of effort goes into making exhibits and designing educational programs, but it's equally important to make these adaptable to specific audiences and specific visitors. And I think our team does a great job of doing this, but of course, we're always looking to improve our processes. So next slide, please. So now I'll briefly talk about what's going on at the Pump House Museum. And the Pump House really has 4 spaces to it that are accessible to visitors. The previous slide actually showed the Discovery Center, and this is kind of an open space with lots of activities for kids, but it can be adapted to different sorts of programs and different sorts of events that are going on. The Pump House was the location of Kingston's original waterworks that pumped clean water to residents to 19th century buildings. And you can see some of those on display at the museum, and you can see a picture of those on the left-hand image on the screen. There's also a room at the Pump House dedicated to trains and railways, including 3 model train displays. And there's a gallery space that changes on an annual basis. And the 2022 exhibit just opened this past Friday, in fact. It's called On the Move, 400 Years of Transportation in Kingston. And it's all about the history of transportation in the city. Next slide, please. And there are a number of programming opportunities at the Pump House. And given the nature of the permanent exhibits, many of these are focused on STEAM education and promoting the idea that anyone can get interested and be involved in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And we have some popular long-running programs, including one called Trains and Tots. And in this one, each week, young kids or really anyone interested in the topic can learn about a different theme. And these are augmented by activities and a carefully selected book geared towards children. For example, in 2022, aligning with National Indigenous Peoples Day, the theme is Kiwatawano. And this is a Cree word for we all play, and includes a great book by Julie Flett, all about the universality of play and playing. We also have educational programs that are associated with our new exhibit, including one called Trace Your Trip, which also includes a great book, in this case by an author named Matt de la Peña, which is about the diverse people a boy meets on a bus trip and encourages kids to think about diversity as they move between places in their own communities. Next slide, please. Now at the McLaughlin Woodworking Museum, a big change for 2022 is that we're shifting from a more traditional sort of museum experience where people can go into the museum and see displays to a space that's dedicated specifically towards educational programming. And our programming here really has 2 main foci. First of all, woodworking, as you might imagine from the name of the museum. And we really encourage people here to get involved in making things and to encourage the idea that anyone can be a maker or can appreciate things that are made by hand. And the second focus is all about nature. And the rural location of the museum out at Grass Creek Park really lends itself to discussing the environment and encouraging all people to engage with the natural world. Moving forward at the McLaughlin, one of the things that we're interested in is promoting the idea around multi-sensory experiences. And this is something that we'd like to encourage. So how textures and smells and sounds, in addition to the visual experience, can be incorporated into programs and exhibits, both about nature, but also about woodworking. So there are lots of different sounds and textures and smells that are associated with these sorts of programs in woodworking. And the McLaughlin Museum is also the main location for a programming series called Campfire Songs, which brings programming to locations outside the downtown Kingston core. And this is often an underserved area. And for 2022, this includes multilinguistic musical performances. And I'll acknowledge here the input and support we've gotten from Arts and Culture Services in preparing this specific programming. So next slide, please. Now at City Hall, there are several small niche cases that you may be familiar with if you've moved through this space. And these are display cases that have rotating content. And they're currently exhibiting community-led displays, again, extending from the Your Stories, Our Histories consultation from a couple of years ago. And you can see an example on the left image on the screen. City Hall also houses the Market Wing Cultural Space. And this is a larger gallery space with opportunities for rotating displays, though this may change a bit in the future. And there are also educational and public programs that Heritage Services runs out of City Hall, and these focus on how representation can be improved in discussions of heritage. So moving away from the narratives that are typically associated with Kingston's built heritage. And in 2022, we're also experimenting with programs outside of our traditional museum spaces, including heritage-focused bike tours to less visited parts of Kingston. And this is to emphasize the city's diverse neighborhoods. So next slide, please. Heritage Services also provides support to Indigenous community-led events and programs, some of which are listed on the screen here. I won't go through each of them individually, but I will mention that our aim here isn't to lead or to design these events, but rather it's to offer logistical support to the community who are leading these events and programs. For example, help with booking spaces or navigating city policies. Next slide, please. So the last thing that I'll mention today is some ideas that we have for future programming. And this is certainly an area that could benefit from any sort of feedback from the committee. At the Pump House, our 2023 exhibit will be on Black history in Kingston, and we'll be designing a series of associated educational and public programs to augment this exhibit. We'll be hiring an Indigenous curator to inform Indigenous exhibitions and programs in Heritage Services, including in the Market Wing Cultural Space at City Hall. We'll also be changing out some of those niche cases, again, hopefully with community input on what can be put into the display cases. And we'll be doing some updates to the Sir John A. Macdonald and John Counter rooms at City Hall to introduce different sorts of narratives and to provide opportunities for other voices to be included in the experience of visiting these rooms. At the McLaughlin Woodworking Museum, one of our longer term goals is to create a sensory garden. So to grow plants and that will allow people to engage with plants and to engage with nature in different sorts of ways to experience the feeling of being in nature and the smells of plants and those sorts of things. So that ends our Heritage Services briefing for today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I believe we can now open it up for questions. If any member of the committee wishes to ask a question. Yes, Zerman.
Hi, thank you. Through you, Councillor Neal and to Kevin, thank you so much for a great presentation, and love to see the kind of rejuvenated motivations that you have here. It's pretty clear you guys are focusing well and hard on trying to be inclusive in many different ways, which is fantastic. Just one recommendation that I had on the heels of what you're doing in 2023 at the Pump House Museum with respect to Black history. It would be great to see immigration history as a whole for the city of Kingston. I know statistically there's been different layers of immigration directly into Kingston from many different parts of the world. Again, it'd be interesting to see what that would look like or where best to have something like that displayed per se. But I think it would be very interesting for, again, speaking, as someone of Pakistani descent, it would be great to have my kids or kids from other different ethnic groups within the city take a look at when and where their families came to Kingston, for example, along with the contributions made, of which there are many, I'm sure, over the years. So that would be interesting.
Great suggestion. Thank you. Yes, Danita.
Yes, wonderful suggestions, Armand. Thank you for that. I have a couple of questions. I was just curious, Kevin, as to how we're doing the outreach for some of this, like as we are getting ready, how are we going to engage different groups? The other thing was also understanding, are the staff, a lot of times they are youth with summer jobs and whatnot, what kind of training they have to perhaps handle microaggressions. You know, there's going to be people that are going to come in with a very strong pro-colonial lens, and others are going to have a very anti-colonial sentiment. And how are we going to equip these youngsters who are typically at these frontline jobs to handle those? Because that can be, again, it can be detrimental if not handled correctly. And the third thing I had was, yeah, are we also looking at creating opportunities for youth from different backgrounds when we are looking at these summer positions and whatnot for hiring with the city? Because that is sort of where the real inclusion happens.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes.
Elsie.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to focus a little bit on the sensory garden, which I think is a very exciting development. And I would just here like to know if there are plans afoot, Kevin, to have this garden with indigenous plants, maybe exclusively, not just in terms of what we see in climate change, but there are so many invasive species that will give beautiful sensory experiences, but not what we want. So that, and with indigenous input in that as well, and places like, or groups like Little Forest Kingston, so that it's all inclusive. And I just want to share something else. You probably know that I'm a Rotarian, and what we do is we use the 4-way test, and it's 4 questions that we ask ourselves. And it's, is the truth, is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And the last one is, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And I was recently at a meeting that said that beneficial to all concerned does not just mean gender, color, abilities, it also means our environment and the trees. So with that in mind, I think it should be beneficial to all concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Ophelia's waving at me. The floor is yours. Thank you.
I want to add to Elsie's comment about the sensory garden. And there's a couple of them around the city, and I know one specifically at Anguinata. So it would be great to see, you know, when it's built, to see what's already here in Kingston and how can we grow and build on that. So maybe look at what has worked for them and what isn't working, so we can expand on that. The one at Anguinata on Portsmouth is quite lovely.
Thank you. Good suggestion. Kevin, did you want to comment on any or all of that?
Absolutely. Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair. I will try to go through in the order that I've jotted them down. And yes, the idea of including immigration history, I think, is really interesting as well. And in some ways builds on our exhibit of this year, which is all about transportation within Kingston, but also how Kingston attaches to other parts of the world. And it also draws a little bit on the 2021 exhibit, which was all about the refugee experience in Canada. But we could tie this specifically, I think, more to Kingston in general and how these sorts of themes work together. So I think that's a very fantastic idea. And thank you for that. In terms of outreach for our 2023 exhibit on Black history, our plan at this point, and we've done some work towards this, sort of in the pre-pandemic or early pandemic stages, we'll start by assembling a committee of interested community members who could really guide and inform the direction that the exhibit takes. And I think this is of really fundamental importance for creating an exhibit that is going to be inclusive and of interest to the community. So that will be our step. And providing opportunities for anyone interested to provide their ideas. And, from my perspective, that always makes for a more interesting exhibit by having the greatest number of voices represented possible. In terms of staff training, this is also a very important issue for us because there are some, summer students that get brought in to deliver some of the programs, to lead the tours of the exhibit, and there are potential issues for microaggressions or even larger aggressions. And one of the things that we take very seriously is training all of the students. And in fact, for our 2022 students, they're starting this week and next, doing a series of training sessions to learn from past experiences that people working in the museum have had. And certainly with our 2021 exhibit, which was on the refugee experience in Canada, it's called Refuge Canada, we were able to take this very seriously and we provide educational opportunities. So it's not a situation where students are thrown into the mix and trying to work it out for themselves, because we're certainly well aware of the potential for very serious sorts of discussions, not always negative, but serious questions that can be asked of visitors, and these have to be answered in appropriate and meaningful ways. And when it comes to hiring summer students, we certainly try to hire from the most diverse candidate pool possible, and we do get some great candidates. And for 2023, we'll be looking forward to hiring summer students that have the capacity to deliver the sorts of programs and tours that are needed for our exhibits. And then in terms of questions about the sensory garden, I should step back for a second and say this is very much in the earliest stages of ideas and thoughts. So really appreciate the ideas that have been offered here. And I think reaching out to other sorts of sensory gardens in Kingston, but also potentially beyond Kingston as well, to gather information on what works, what doesn't work, the sorts of communities that engage with sensory gardens, I think is really important as well. I think there's a lot of background work that can be done. We sort of, sometimes we think about the actual process of planting things in the ground, but that's really a later sort of stage in the design process. Again, thinking about considerations across the EDI spectrum from the earliest stages is really important, and gathering this sort of information, I think, is a key step, really the next step that we have to take beyond just the idea and the general space of where this will go. In terms of indigenous plants and using local sorts of plants, I think this is a fantastic idea. And I think it's something that we'll put some thought towards now that it's on our mind, about the sorts of plants that are appropriate, that are going to be advantageous to the environment, and not just the plants, but also the insects and the other sorts of animals that engage with the plants in much the same way that people do. But to also give the breadth of senses in terms of smells and textures and sounds that can come from a garden of this sort, I think is going to be really important as well. So I appreciate those sorts of comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I just had one. I know that we're planning, and rightfully so, for 2023. Are we hiring summer staff for anything in this coming summer? I know other museums in town have put in requests for funding from the federal and perhaps the provincial government as well for summer students. Are we doing likewise?
Yes, thank you. And through you, we have received federal funding from Young Canada Works and Canada Summer Jobs to support student hiring for 2022, and we'll be budgeting other funding as well. So we have 2 students that will be working specifically on collections, the civic collection, and maintaining and managing the civic collection. And we have 6 summer students that are beginning tomorrow, in fact, with their training for the next couple of weeks, who will be working largely at the Pump House Museum, but also supporting programs at the McLaughlin Woodworking Museum and the Campfire series, which brings programming to rural areas. So we have a total of 8 students for
Excellent.
2022.
That's great. Our tax dollars at work. Good idea. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. And we'll move on to the next thing on the agenda, which I can't see because it's not in front of me.
I can help you with that, Councillor Neil. The next agenda item is the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Office report from Q2 2022. And I believe Mohammed Hassan is here to speak to that.
Excellent. Go right ahead, Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'm here to brief this committee about the EDI office Q2 2022 report on updates of the work that we have done. So this report actually summarizes some of the recent activities related to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Specifically, in this report, we have a status update for Q2 2022 as an Exhibit A, and some specific updates are related to accommodation policies and procedure, social media and staff communication, EDI Champions Initiative, flag raising policy, integrated event planning, multicultural festival planning, and EDI follow-up and community engagement work that we have done recently. If you look into more details on the accommodation policy and procedure, this is something that we worked with the help of Human Resources and Organizational Development, as well as Legal Services Department, to create an employee accommodation policy as well as guidelines to accommodate creed, disability, family status, gender identity and gender expression, pregnancy and breastfeeding of corporation staff. This policy is now being reviewed by relevant stakeholder departments who would have direct impact after this policy would be in place. Then this policy will go to corporate management team for final approval. We recently, in partnership with Communication Customer Experience Department, did recognize several events through social media posts, graphics, as well as internal communication. Some of these important areas covered are related to the advocacy, awareness, and educational aspects of these causes. These events are consistent to the first capital illumination policy, which recognize several days of significance, which is listed in this report in detail. The flag display policy, which is attached as Exhibit B in this report, it's with consultation of Heritage Services, Legal Services, Communication and Customer Experience, Facility Management, and Construction Service and City Clerk Office. We reviewed the flag display policy with an EDI lens. During this process, an environmental scan was also conducted to understand municipal best practices across Canada. The environmental scan concluded that flags are a clear, visible statement of respect for and acknowledgement of presence and value of a community. The City of Kingston's flag display policy needs to be updated in order to better reflect the cultural diversity of its residents, and also aligning with the City of Kingston's land recognition statement. So in this policy, apart from several changes, a significant change that we are recommending is that city needs to display the flags of Indigenous people that are consistent with its land acknowledgement, as well as the Métis Nation flag and the Franco-Ontarian flag. Many municipalities and regions have already taken these steps toward equity and inclusivity and symbolic accepting the diversity of their municipalities. This policy will be presented to City Council for final approval, and new flags will be installed in 2023, pending Heritage Committee approval of additional flagpole location in Confederation Park. The policy is attached Exhibit B. The next thing that I want to update this committee is about integrated event planning in collaboration with Arts and Cultural Services, Heritage Service, Rec and Leisure Services Department. An integrated event planning group is formed to ensure all city-led initiatives are consistent with city EDI's plan. We are looking at several city-led programming and events through EDI lens and working with several intersectional community groups to learn their expectations and how city can meet them. Multicultural festival planning in collaboration with Rec and Leisure Services, Arts and Cultural Services, and Heritage Services. We conducted several consultancy meetings with the former festival organizers and EDI committee members. And I like to take this opportunity to thank specifically Sunita and Zerman for their time and input in the initial consultation and the continuous support as we are building on to this festival for this year. We also had consultations with Tourism Kingston, Downtown Kingston Business Improvement Area, and Indigenous market representatives. During these meetings, the new format and dates were discussed. And recently, Rec and Leisure Services put out a call, which is attached as an Exhibit C for all cultural association groups and clubs in Kingston regarding the upcoming festival. We also targeted international students associations at both post-secondary institutions in Kingston. The last update in my list is the EDI census follow-up. The findings of cities' EDI staff census is now being discussed with commissioners and their directors in separate meetings to go over specific outcomes of their departments. These meetings covers the strengths, weaknesses, and future plannings to address their areas of improvement and how we can have a better departmental action plan to address some of these focus needs of departments that could vary from each department to the other department. That's all I have in terms of the briefing. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the floor, from the committee? Yes, Hal. Oh, if you want to unmute yourself. There you go.
Really appreciate your report, Mohammed, and it's good to see all the initiatives that are in place with EDI in the city. I only have one thing from the attachment. There's a section, you alluded to it, on social media staff communications, and there's a long list of very appropriate dates. But what jumps out at me as an old fogey part of the white majority is I didn't see anything about Ramadan. I didn't see anything about Easter and Pentecost. And another one that's, because of my own background, very attached to is World Sight Day, which is in the disability part. So it seems to me that if that list of things for this social media is representative of what's being profiled by the city, in this whole EDI arena, we shouldn't leave out the majority. So, ergo, I'm wondering where's Easter and Pentecost, and I'm not part of this, but Ramadan. There's things that, for me, should have been on that long list that were not there. So I just throw that out there for what it's worth.
Thank you. Yes, Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you. Hal, this list is actually derived from the federal government and provincial governments recognized days. The actual the list of all diversity and inclusion events and recognized days, it's pretty long, and with the current capacity, we had to shortlist it to certain numbers. And also another reason why we are not we are not seeing a lot of days here is that we also shortlisted some of the days to have more internal educational pieces attached to it. One example is definitely the at the start of the Ramadan, we shared some learning resources and internal communication for staff, how to accommodate and support their peers who are fasting, and what to ask and what not to ask from your peers who are fasting, and like assumptions and stereotypes around that. So there are two different pieces that we are simultaneously trying to take from here. And also we want to keep an opportunity for community led groups to also request for some of these recognition and illuminations going forward, because we don't want to book every day proactively, which sort of closes the opportunity for any community group to come forward and request for any recognition. Because if we proactively do it, then there's a chance that there will be several overlaps that can stop us from recognizing something that could matter in that very moment for Kingston's residents.
Thank you. Yes, Vanessa.
Hi there, everyone, and through you, Councillor. Mohammed, I was just wondering if there's any on the same wavelength as Hall. Is there any look at maybe adding International Overdose Awareness Day in August? Is that, I know there was some talk about changing the city's lights in the downtown there, but I know you went over that a little bit, but is that in the talks at all?
So we can definitely explore that if a formal request from the community led organization or individuals come through. We have a process for recognizing anything that community can request within the city illumination policy. And if it I'm not aware of any talks specifically to this event in August, but if there's going to be something, it will go through the regular process where the applicant needs to submit an application through city clerk office, and then the procedure is that it's approved through CAO's office.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vanessa, could you send me that information? On Wednesday, I'm on KFLNA Public Health, and I'd like to share that with them, and they may very well ask that it be recognized at City Hall.
Okay, great. I will send that your way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll turn to the clerk again to steer me right.
No worries, Councillor Neal. So we do have a member of the public who's joined, so they are participating via phone. So if that member of the public would like to make comment on the report, please indicate your desire to do so by raising your virtual hand, which is *9 on the telephone. I'll give you a couple seconds to make that determination. And I'm not seeing any hands raised. So then, Councillor Neal, the next business item is the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee 2021 report card. And I'm happy to speak to this and provide a bit of an overview to the committee.
Please do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Neal. So the report that is before the committee is a standard report required of all advisory committees to Kingston City Council. Really simply, it provides council with an overview of what the committee has accomplished in the year, as well as what the committee's goals are moving forward into the coming year. So this committee has only been formed fully for about 6 months of 2021, so it's a very brief report. But you've had a chance to read it. It contains details about what the committee accomplished in 2021. And the next step is for, if it is approved at the meeting today by the committee, it will go to Kingston City Council for review at the, I believe it's the second meeting in May it will go to. And that is pretty much it, Councillor Neal. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the report if there are any. You went back on mute there.
Here we go. Thank you very much. Any questions regarding the report? I think it was an excellent summary of what we've done. So any questions whatsoever? Seeing none, thank you very much.
It does have a recommendation, Councillor Neal, so we'll need a
Yes.
mover, seconder, and a vote to send it to council.
I knew that, I just forgot. Is there a mover and a seconder? And then it'll go on to council as part of a report. I saw Sunita's hand, I see Zerman's hand. And I saw Ophelia's hand, and she probably wants her name in on the minutes somewhere. So I will accept Sunita and Ophelia.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments or questions? I'll call the question on the recommendation. All those in favor? Carried. We are a unanimous group. Thank you very much. And back to Derek.
So thank you, Councillor Neal. There are no motions on the agenda. Next is notices of motion. Any hands there? Under other business, if I may, Mr. Chair, I'll just take this opportunity to let the committee know, as I indicated in my email last week, this is my last meeting as the clerk for the committee. I will be temporarily moving into the role of acting deputy city clerk for 6 months. So beginning with the meeting in June, Elizabeth Fawcett will be the new committee clerk, and going forward, all communications regarding the committee will be going through her. So Elizabeth is a very able clerk, so I'm sure you will enjoy working with her as well. So, and I will be back with the committee in 6 months. So that's about it. And then Councillor Neal, I think all that's left.
I will
go ahead.
mention that Elizabeth has survived months of being the clerk for planning committee. So she's a very able clerk. So go right ahead, Derek.
Okay, all that's left is the date and time of the next meeting is, I'll note, Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022 at 1 p.m. It was moved to accommodate some schedule changes. And then, Councillor Neal, it's everybody's favorite portion of the meeting, time to call for and vote on adjournment.
Yep. And this is when all the hands go up, right? Motion to adjourn with the seconder. No hands. Thank you, Ophelia. Thank you, Zerman. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. We shall see you all in June. So long.